And in California, Bay Area Rapid Transit Police thwarted an expected protest at a train station in San Francisco. How? By cutting off cell phone service. Well, BART officials told KTVU's Eric Rasmussen that it was a small sacrifice for safety. But some passengers, they worried, could have made a real emergency even worse.
With a small army of police on the platform at BART's Civic Center station and even more officers on standby above ground, authorities shut down a protest before it even started. The goal to avoid a repeat of this scene last month when another protest over the BART Police shooting of Charles Hill quickly got out of hand and disrupted service system-wide. This time, the planned demonstration never happened, even though we found at least one man who admitted he was there for the protest. So what's going on? Where is everybody?
You never know.
Okay, all right.
It might be here, it might not.
The one thing everyone seemed to notice, including us, was a sudden lack of cell phone service.
I'm scared now.
Especially when some realized it was not a random outage.
If you can't get any cell service and something happens, what are you going to do? Absolutely nothing.
Actually, the media relations people made that decision.
But at this late briefing, we had a tough time getting answers about why BART made the decision or whether the tactic has ever been used before.
I don't know. I don't know because the tactics that the cops use, I'm not always privy to.
He specifically said it was the public relations department that made the decision to turn off the cell service.
We suggested it.
Casey Jordan is a contributor to In Session on CNN's sister network, True TV, and she joins us now from New York. Casey, good to see you. BART officials say that police, good to see you. They say that police say that the #1 priority was to keep everybody safe and that they had successfully done that. But shutting down cell phone service, you know, obviously a lot of people raised eyebrows over that. And the first question is this something that we've seen before? Is it legal?
Well, I haven't been able to find another incident in which this has happened. I think perhaps it is unprecedented, and yet that's how these illegal issues do come to light and get debated. Whether it's legal or not, it hasn't been tested in the courts. Public safety exceptions or encroachments on our personal freedoms do happen. And remember, we just had evidence of that protest getting out of control last month. Of course, everybody wants their personal freedoms. They fear censorship. They're all worried about living in a police state, and yet when a protest turns into violence and people get hurt, they love to blame the police. So you can't have it both ways. The Public Relations Department did make this decision, but I'm sure they did it after consulting their counsel within the police department.
Casey, a lot of people wondering what happened to freedom of speech here, assembly without government interference that's protected by the First Amendment.
Oh, well, there was nothing to stop the protest from happening. They didn't try to shut down the protest. They simply turned off the cell service so that it couldn't become viral. And I believe that they did that based on how the protest from last month really accelerated. Again, the framers of the Constitution could not possibly have foreseen the world that we now live in with our smartphones and our Wi-Fi and our hotspots. The bottom line is it was a lot different 200 years ago when your protest was standing on a soapbox on the street corner. Now you can incite people with misinformation, with calls to violence, and in many ways, things can get out of hand. It really is just a cost-benefit analysis of where your freedom of speech begins to threaten the public safety. And again, they did use intelligence. This was they did verify the protest, and they were simply trying to stop a repeat of what happened last month.
Casey, they say it's a matter of public safety, but what would have happened if there was an emergency and if passengers wouldn't have been able to even call 911?
That's a great question, and you have to ask yourself, do you have a fundamental right to cell service? I mean, how did the world work before 911? I think what the police did, and we saw some of that in that video, is they really made their police presence known at that particular station where the protest was going to happen. And as much as we are so reliant on our cell phones, the bottom line is that when you can simply shout for help, ask others to help you out, I think there are still police call boxes. Anyone could flag down a police officer. At the same time, nothing bad did happen, but if it had happened, we may not see so much public support for that particular tactic
Casey,
at that
very
time.
quickly here, if I could turn the corner, the recent riots in London that we've seen, the British Prime Minister David Cameron says that he's thinking about blocking all social media during those demonstrations. And free speech groups are saying, really? Would you really do that? I mean, Arab rulers did the same thing during these anti-government uprisings the past year or so. I mean, doesn't that violate basic freedoms?
I think it's going to take courts to interpret where we cut the line, and I absolutely agree that it's a slippery slope. What we saw with the BART station was temporary. It was perhaps a few minutes to a few hours, I'm not sure. But doing it as total public policy, where it is unbridled censorship, where you're shutting down things, and only the lawmakers at the helm are deciding for how long and for what purpose, that is dangerous. And so civil rights advocates argue that we could end up living in a police state if this policy starts encroaching on our personal freedoms, and yet everybody wants to be safe. I think it's going to end up in the courts, and they will be the final determinants of what the state can and cannot do.
All right, we'll be following that. You as well in the courts. Thank you so much, Casey. Have a good weekend.
Absolutely.